Welcome to the Magna AI podcast, where we sit down with principals, district leaders, and instructional innovators who are reshaping what's possible in the classroom with a little help from AI. Together, we explore how school leaders are using smart tools and bold ideas to support teachers, personalize learning, and improve outcomes for every student. Welcome, listeners, to another exciting episode of Magna AI podcast. Today, we have with us Dr. Jim Masters, who's currently serving as a superintendent of Henry County Public Schools in Kentucky. He's overseeing a district known for its innovative educational technologies. Leadership focuses on improving student outcomes through evidence-based literacy reform and the strategic use of AI tools. Dr. Masters has been collaborating closely with the Board of Education to enhance student achievement and align district initiatives with academic growth. Dr. Masters' approach emphasizes servant leadership and relation building within the school community. So I'm really excited to have Dr. Masters here. Welcome, Dr. Masters.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Dr. Masters, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience, how you got here, and what motivated you to be a leader in school?
hmm I think I had a wonderful family who always supported me. I was very, very lucky with that. I had teachers that were very encouraging. So, to make a very long story short, I just developed a personality where I wanted to help people, and education was the perfect fit. So, after nearly 30 years, I've served the children of the Commonwealth and have enjoyed every second of it. So, what really got me into education was just the fact I have a natural instinct that I want to help people.
Great, wonderful. So I think, and that goes, I see, towards your initiatives to supporting teachers in changing educational landscape. So can you talk a little bit about as the school system has changed, and we've seen like different technologies and also processes and things like that. How has your approach to supporting teachers evolved throughout your career?
The bottom line is, I think that regardless of the decade that I've been a part of, if you want any initiative to be successful, there has to be buy-in. And I think the only way to make that happen is to put people first. So there's three critical questions that my district always addresses in order to ensure we put people first, which is, do I feel cared for? And this is for adults as well as students. Do I have a trusted peer to turn to, or in the case of students, do I have a trusted adult to turn to? And then the third question is, do I feel valued? Do I feel part of the school? So let's say we're looking at an initiative we would like to begin in the fall of the next school year. Well, before we even start the process, we have to get feedback from those who are in the trenches every single day. So in Henry County, for example, every initiative that we've implemented has been driven 100% by staff feedback. And surprisingly, we've really learned to embrace the power of less, which means that we don't take on 15 different initiatives and overload our staff. We focus on as few as possible to make the biggest improvement in student learning. And equally important to us, are we improving the working environment of our staff?
Makes sense. Uh, and so as you talked about, right, like it's a been changing landscape and you figure out like what initiatives to put in place. Can you share some insights in terms of there's been a lot of like expectations that have been shifting even for teachers in terms of the load and all the things that they have to do. So can you talk a little bit about that? How have you seen the expectations shift for the teachers?
Two specific changes that I've noticed in just the last 5 years within Kentucky that are put upon teachers. Number one, all school districts must now have what's called a high quality instructional resource. In other words, a guaranteed and viable curriculum in literacy and mathematics. Now, 20 years ago, you could not hop on edreports.org and find what would be called a high quality instructional resource or a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Now we're able to do that, but it does come with some consequences. That being, teachers often feel they lose their individuality to make decisions on what's best for students. So you have to be able to find that balance of respecting the professionalism of teachers and their knowledge base in in collaboration with the evidence-based curriculum that you're required or mandated to implement. And of course, all too often, these mandates are unfunded. Then you have to, another one that's very simplistic is communication. How do we communicate with our students? I think it's a good thing, but it's just an example of new regulations placed upon teachers. You know, we have to have permission for students to contact, I'm sorry, for teachers to contact students. We have to use certain platforms that are allowed. And, you know, now we've also got in place, again, I think it's good, but it's changes. We have to identify students who are not reading on grade level, provide the same interventions that we've provided before, but now the difference is we're having to ensure we take time to meet with parents, have a literacy committee or a math committee to make determinations on whether or not we progress a student or retain them. And there's many more examples, but that's just in the last couple of years.
Got it. So you talked about your decision-making process to identify some of these initiatives and so on. Can you talk a little bit about which support initiatives might have actually resonated with the faculty the most?
A guaranteed viable curriculum, and that actually we moved on that before the state had mandated, and that actually came from talking to every single staff member in the district. So their number one complaint was time. And when we dug deeper, well, you know, what's consuming the majority of your time? It was lesson planning, because they're having to start from scratch and generate their own lesson plans. So what that created was you would have one student learning something different in one school, could be high quality, but not at the same pace or time. Why does that matter? Because, well, in our district, we do have students that move from school to school. And so teachers got together. We brought in 50% representation from each school. Couldn't bring in 100% because it was just too many people at one time, but 50% representation of each school. They went through edreports.org, What Works Clearinghouse. They looked at the curriculums that we could purchase. They used a high quality instructional resource rubric that the Department of Education put out. They made the decision. They decided what type of professional learning that they needed, and then we put it in action. And the result was, for 3 straight years now, we've reduced novice and we've increased proficiency. But it was not a top down decision. The only reason why it worked is because it was a staff made decision.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So it looks like teachers took ownership of like their own professional development and which actually guided your decisions. So how do you balance like traditional PD versus technology driven support? I think you talked a little bit about looking at solutions.
I think regardless whether you're looking at technology or professional learning on curriculum or professional learning on behavioral interventions and management, it really it comes down to this. It cannot be a one and done event. If that's the case, you're never going to be successful with the initiative. It has to go back to embrace the power of less. And actually, that's I'm taking that from Mike Schmoker's work, but just focus on two or three things that you want to do really, really well, and map out how is that professional learning going to look over the course from July 1 to June 30th. And then again, start by getting staff feedback. What do you need in order to give you the tools and knowledge and skills for you to be successful with students? That's how you do your framework for professional learning.
Sounds good. Uh, So now, as we have seen in the past few years, there's been more and more has been asked from the teachers. Their workload is increasing, and they have to support so many students and like updated curriculum and things like that. So I want to move to the topic of teacher burnout and retention through culture and systems. So in your district, how do you understand and address teacher burnout?
Actually, it's more simple than I think a lot of people make it out to be. It's called sitting down and listening, and actually talking to teachers, not just one time, but throughout the year. Yes, we did have, you know, for the last 5 years, one time in the year, big events where the whole staff would come together and get feedback. We'd collect it, synthesize it. But it also comes from talking to teachers on a daily basis, subbing for them in their classroom to remember what it feels like to have to implement that guaranteed and viable curriculum or provide an intervention. Feedback drives all the decision making. So, for example, teacher burnout. In no particular order, feedback drove us to hire a physician's assistant for our district. Why? Because teachers have families just like everybody else. They would have to take a whole day off to try to get a doctor's appointment. And where we live, Henry County, there's not a physician. Uh, well, I take that back. There's not a lot of physicians to choose from within our county. So we've enabled our teachers to have a telehealth conference with a physician assistant we have in the district so that they can get medication that day if they need to. We've looked at helping them with pursuing their post-secondary education, moving on to a master's degree or a different certification by helping them pay for the cost up front, and then we would slowly take repayment for that cost or use grants to help pay for it. I mean, I can go on and on with examples of where their feedback drove our decisions. Oh, teacher workday. We doubled the number of teacher workdays based on them needing more time. We gave them a vacation day on a Friday in February and one in March because that was the highest burnout time according to feedback. So, what did that do for us? Well, it took us in terms of the Impact Working Conditions Survey, which is an anonymous survey teachers do every 2 years. We went from 111th to 12th in school leadership, 124th to 19th in school climate, 132nd out of 172 districts in school leadership relationships to 14th. Managing student behavior went from 71st to 8th, and educating all students went from 83rd to 14th. And it's all because we just listened and we addressed those three critical questions.
Wow, that having an in-house physician, that is like really out of the box. I haven't heard of that one before, so that's pretty amazing. And uh, means these really are like wonderful initiatives. So, in terms of impacting the retention and reducing the teacher churn, did you see evidence of that? And I know like you talked about the rankings and that those are like really
Yeah.
great rankings.
Yes, dramatic. I mean, we're down to probably 15% turnover ratio with that. And here's the really cool thing about that: by focusing on staff needs, it automatically addresses student needs. Why? Because they're the ones that are working with the kids every single day. Um, it drove our accountability from a 66 to a 72 over a 3 year period. And our students even respond better in terms of the climate for which they're learning in. So we went from adults care about me to all the way up to 96%. They feel like part of the school. We went from 82% to 92%. This one I love. I have an adult, trusted adult to always turn to. We went from 87% to 97%. And feeling safe at school, we're at up to 98% of kids say, yes, I feel safe. And again, that all comes from listening to your staff.
Yeah, those are pretty amazing numbers. So now you took these initiatives, they seem to be working. Now, how do you make sure that they continue to work and that you are able to flag any early signs of like burnout and things kind of changing?
It really depends on which, for lack of better terms, initiative that you're talking about. So there are some things that you can monitor simply by asking for feedback at the end of the year. There are some things that you could monitor getting feedback monthly. There are some things that you may go into the classroom on a weekly basis to collect data to see is it making an impact, and what if not, what do we need to do different. So again, it all depends on what it is, what type of outcome you're looking for.
Makes sense. Uh, And now with the AI coming on the horizon and actually starting to get used, how has that impacted teacher workload? And I think you talked about lesson planning, but I didn't get whether like you started using some AI tools for that to help
Yes,
the workload and that.
we have, and I'll try to be short and to the point with this response. So, um, first, we all agree that we are not going to humanize AI. Um, we are only going to use it if it will improve creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking skills of students as compared to diminish them. Again, we believe less is more. In fact, we're all big believers in less screen time as compared to more. But when we use it, we have to ask ourselves: is it making us more effective, and is it making us more efficient? So here are some specific examples. We use Google Notebook to score on-demand writing pieces because it made us more efficient and more effective with the consistency of getting that feedback. And then it was the teacher who would take that initial feedback that was done by Google Notebook to review it and sit down and meet with the students. So now the teacher has more time to physically meet with students, which is the greatest thing they can ever do in terms of relationship building. And Notebook takes on the heavy lifting of the scoring and reviewing. And why did we do that? Well, our state, when we submit on-demand writing to the state for our end of the year assessments, that's how they score on-demand writing. Lesson planning. So we created a Google Gemini evidence-based lesson planner. Now we have a guaranteed viable curriculum, but not all the way up through high school. So we can use the evidence-based lesson planner. And what I mean by that, every activity is connected to Hattie's work and Marzano's work, and it even lists the effect size. But we were able to create, well, what do we want that lesson plan format to look like? Which is basically I do, we do, you do, reflect. We've used a math tutor that we created in Gemini, and we did a survey of over 250 students to figure out, was this helping you learn? And here's what's kind of funny. The number one thing that students did not like about it, it would not give them the answer. They did not necessarily like going through that productive struggle, but that's what we want to. We want to build their critical thinking skills. And the Gemini Gym would not give them the answer. It used Socratic questioning to help get them to understanding the why behind the solutions. And we've used it. Now what we're looking at is creating a Gemini Gym that will take the data from our universal screener and then connect that data, those results, student data results, to our guaranteed and viable curriculum and our intervention. So to cut to the chase, we're using this software to say, okay, here's all the student results. I'm going to identify their strengths, their weaknesses. I'm going to connect it directly to the units you're getting ready to teach. And I'm going to tell you which students need intervention for phonics or phonemic awareness or vocabulary. And I'm going to tell you when is the best lesson to give that intervention to where it connects to what the actual learning is in the classroom going on. And oh, by the way, I'll take some of Hattie's ideas and I'll create a specific self-grading worksheet or learning path sheet that the student will get that's individualized for each student. So it doesn't look exactly the same. So we're super excited about taking a look at how that can impact student learning.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and we can talk about. I would love to learn more about it and how you're doing it. Can you talk a little bit about the process behind creating the AI writing feedback system? I know, like it takes a lot of time aligning with the standards and making sure that the feedback is high quality. So I think we'd love to hear what your process was.
So I think whenever you're trying to build something with AI, you have to look at, well, what's your objective to achieve? And then you have to go back to, are we ensuring we're not humanizing it? That's number one. Number two is, if we use this tool that we're trying to create, will it build those skills that I was telling you about earlier? If you can say yes to those two things, those two questions, then you've got the green light to look at building it. So then the next step rather is, well, what's your prompt going to be? And I'm specifically talking about if you're using Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude, it doesn't Perplexity, it doesn't matter. What's your prompt? And there's no golden nugget, so to speak, that you have to use. Like I know Google has the acronym PARTS. Mine was robot. It was just easy for me to remember. But regardless of what you do, you got to identify a role. You have to tell the AI uh, what is it you want it to be. What is it? Is it a educator? Is it a researcher? You've got to identify the objective. What is it you're wanting it to achieve? What's the end product? You've got to give it its barriers and its background information. And so here's what I mean by background information. within ChatGPT or Gemini, you can have a knowledge section, and a lot of people don't take advantage of that.
Makes sense. Yeah. You touched upon a lot of important points there. So now that you built the system, what changes in the student performance did you see as a result of building this feedback tool?
Two specific examples would be writing. We used Google Notebook as well as Gemini in creating gems to help them with the on demand writing process. But again, I want to point out never, never designed to give an answer, only designed to question and generate critical thinking skills. 100% of our kids that were using this, and this is at the high school level, improve their on-demand writing scores and maintain that. Why? Because we made sure that whatever AI we were using would build critical thinking skills, not diminish them. Another example is the math tutor. Some kids loved it, some kids didn't like it, but they all agreed they liked how it broke the problem down to get them thinking. And why is that important? You got to remember, a teacher's plate is so full. You've got 30 kids in a classroom, and there's no way that you can get to every single kid and give them the time that you want to give them. So the math tutor was simply a tool a teacher could use to help work with kids individually. And here's the other thing I like about AI. It's the first tech tool that we've had in probably 30 years that can truly confer with us. Right or wrong, good or bad, hallucinations, but it can confer. And that's what spurred my passion for AI. I struggled terribly with learning mathematics as a student. About 3 years ago, I used, I think it was ChatGPT and Gemini for that matter, to start just seeing could I help learn math? Can I learn math? For the first time in my life, like I'm getting this, and here's why: I was no longer afraid to ask questions. As a student, that was a big barrier for me. I was too embarrassed to ask 15 to 20 questions in a class, nor did my teacher have time. AI would allow me to do that. It never ran out of patience. It had the time, and that was good. But I will say this: my my passion for learning was spurred by the teachers that I had. I always had teachers that could do something that AI and no other technology could do, and is that they made me feel cared for. They gave me hope, and they encouraged me to never give up.
Yeah, you said it right, and I think that's the thing, right? Because of all the workload and everything, that human effect and that mentoring effect and the time available for the teachers has been diminishing. And I think with this technology, this is, I think, where the most potential is, where it can give that time back and those relationships and humanizing effect that is so critical. So, and we are an AI company as well, right? But some of the times we see there can be some obstacles to like using AI with like biases and so on and so forth. So, have you come across some obstacles related to what the project that you had from your community in using AI?
No, but I think that's because again we started with just gaining feedback from students and parents and staff. We didn't jump into the 10-foot pool, so to speak. We kind of waded the waters first, and we started with teachers using AI before we began dipping in with students. And here's something critical: the math tutor, which we implemented with over 250 students. Every teacher and other staff members and parents tried it first. And we asked them, try to break it, try to get it to give you inappropriate responses, try to get it to give you answers, try anything and everything, try it, because we want to feel safe when we use this. Because again, remember, one of our two rules is never humanize AI, and we wanted to make sure that we avoided that. So it was tried and tested before we even gave it to students.
So, and I think that getting that feedback is really important, and buy-in helps you with the buy-in. Um, can you talk about how do you ensure balance between formative and summative assessments?
I think that formative always should drive instruction, and I think every staff member in the country, I think, would tell you that kids are we're assessing kids like for lack of better terms, to death. I mean, we're doing universal screeners, we're doing state testing, we're doing, like you said, formative assessments, summative assessments. And the bottom line is this: when is it effective? When you use it to guide the next steps to improve student learning. And so we always try to make sure, and we're not perfect, um, but we always try to ensure whatever assessment we're giving kids, is it going to lead to an improved outcome? So the way we balance it is, can we do check-ins and check-outs? Can we do short reflections at the end of a lesson? And then when we do give a unit assessment for literacy and mathematics, we give the same unit assessment district-wide so that teachers can come together on those teacher work days, reflect on the results, analyze the questions that were provided, analyze student results, and then make a determination of, well, how do we respond to this? What do we need to do? So I'll give an example. What do you mean respond? Could be something as simple as modeling. So when we see that, let's say 65% of students didn't answer a question correctly on the unit exam that we gave district-wide, staff will come together on teacher workday and say, how could we model thinking for our students aloud? And that literally means a teacher would go in, put the problem or question back up in the classroom, and the teacher would pretend that he or she is a student, and they would model what they're thinking inside their brain to help kids understand how to approach and answer specific questions.
Makes sense. Um, you talked about this AI feedback initiative and some other PD initiatives that you have implemented in the past. Can you talk how the effectiveness of some of the recent, let's say, AI-based PD initiatives compared to other ones that you had implemented before in terms of student improvement in student outcomes?
Yeah, I think, again, it all spurs from uh, your feedback and what our teachers are interested in. So in other words, yes, I have a passion for AI and using it, but that doesn't really mean much if I'm saying, well, I'm superintendent, I'm going to go to every school and I'm going to give a PD on how to use AI. And it's going to fail miserably. I've got to listen to what is it my staff are saying they need. So if lesson planning, for example, is an issue, why? Because of time. Well, then that answers a question or a problem that they're having, creating an evidence-based lesson planner. Same thing with the math tutor or on-demand writing scoring. When you address a need that staff are saying students have and they have, you are much more likely to generate buy-in. What's that mean? Well, that means staff are going to implement it with integrity, and that leads to higher student outcomes. And that's what's happened for us with specifically literacy and mathematics. I mean, we've been very lucky over the last 3 years. Well, it's not luck, it's due to the hard work staff, but over the last 3 years, we've improved in just about every single accountable category. Again, that's the difference between, hey, I like something, I'm going to do a top down initiative, and it fails miserably, as compared to starting with those who are in the trenches every day, listening to what they need and find solutions, then implementing a plan for implementation.
Makes sense. Based on what you've seen and improvements that you've been able to achieve, what are some of the future assessment gaps that you're aiming to close with AI or with other tools?
The big one I want to work on is we are information. Well, let me phrase that. We're data rich, information poor, and what that means is we as staff members, for example, give a universal screener 3 times a year, lots and lots of data. The problem is deciphering, well, what do we do with that data? Now, we can easily look at data and say, well, I've got 7 students that I know need intervention in phonics. Well, what's the most productive way to grow those students in phonics? What's that look like? I don't have time to go through every single unit before school starts. I'd like to, but I don't have time to dig through all 11 units to see where I need to focus the most to increase phonics in terms of student retaining the knowledge they need. There comes AI. AI can help us do that more efficiently and more effectively, to give teachers time what they need to really sit down and think about, this is the type of station rotation I'm going to do when I get to lesson 3 of unit 1. I'm going to pull the following 7 students and put them in this group. to give them reinforcement within phonics. That's where I think AI is our next step in really closing that gap of individual student needs. And last but not least, we have to connect it to the research. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier. How do we get students involved? Student self-assessment is one of the highest effect sizes. AI can help us generate something as simple as my learning journey sheet for the students, and it can individualize it. We don't have the time individually to do that. AI can do it for us.
Yeah, that's so true. So, with the PD initiatives that you actually have, how do you ensure that that professional development translates into classroom practice?
So that goes through monitoring and being in the classrooms, asking ourselves, what is it do we expect to see? We being staff, administrators, what do we all agree that we should see when we come into a classroom? So here's a very easy, specific example. We all agree that we should see a learning intention and success criteria, not just posted, that's just the first step. But can we actually walk up to 3 or 4 students and say, hey, what are you learning today? And that student can tell us what they're to know and be able to do. And then can you take it further? Can you get to the point and say, well, how do you know what's a way that you can demonstrate that you do know that and you can do that? And if they can tell you, do you see the difference already from just having something like a learning target posted on the board to actually it translating into students clearly understand what they're able to know and be able to do? That's an example. And we would track that data. We would go into the classroom, we would look for that data, we would ask students those questions, and then we would say, how are we doing? Well, if we go in a classroom and only 37% even have a learning intention or success criteria available or posted, for lack of better terms, we need to work on that. That's our first step. If we get to the point where we're in January and we've only got 42% of students that can tell us what there's to know and be able to do, how do we work on that? Well, you take it back to PLC and you find solutions. Then we all agree these are the following strategies we're going to implement. How are we going to monitor it and measure it? And equally important to me is you got to celebrate it. When you're getting it done, you have got to celebrate it and reward staff for that growth as well as the students.
Absolutely. Uh, Now, with the PD initiatives, how do you make sure, because there are like very diverse teachers across different grade levels and schools, how do you make sure that the PD initiatives are differentiated for different schools and grade levels and subjects?
So I think that's where you go back to embracing the power of less. So in other words, instead of me looking at, well, we need to improve on student questioning, we need to improve on formative assessments, we need to improve on this and that, and you get 17 to 20 different things, you're never going to go anywhere. What you start with is, look, we've all agreed we're going to implement this evidence-based curriculum for literacy, for example. What does that look like in every classroom? What type of PD do we need to provide, preferably led by our own staff members, but what type of PD do we need to provide throughout the year to make sure staff have what they need in order to implement it with integrity? So I think that's where it doesn't, in that situation, regardless of the school, you've got that core fundamental expectation that everyone's bought into and agreed to. That's what you focus on. Now, how do you individualize? Well, that would come through within your individual PLCs because grade levels have individual needs, not just schools, but even grade levels. And you focus on, okay, what can we work on for the next 30 to 60 to 90 days that's specific to us? And again, it can't be a one and done thing. It's literally got to be what's our 30, 60, 90-day plan to improve on this one area.
There are so many things that you want to do, right? Like with the professional development and so many needs. How do you manage funding for these ongoing effective professional development initiatives?
Keep it in house. In other words, you're always going to have what I call rock stars within any given area and allow them to come together, design a PD with their peers, and allow them to implement the professional learning. And I'm so glad you brought that up. I come from a very small rural district. every single penny needs to go toward staffing and funding our salaries while providing students with all the resources they need. I just do not have the funding to really go out to a lot of different outside agencies. So the biggest step of all is to, especially PD, is to have it in-house.
Oh, makes sense. Great. So yeah, a lot of interesting discussion and insights. I want to move on to our lightning round to get some quick questions in. So when you joined as the superintendent, can you talk about like one word in terms of how you felt during your first week as a superintendent?
Excited.
Great. Uh, what's your leadership style?
Servant.
What's some advice now that you think back and looking at your career that you feel you should have received when you joined as a superintendent?
Listen 4 times as much as you speak.
Thank you, Dr. Masters. Really appreciated your time. It was a very engaging discussion and I learned a lot. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Have a story, question, or insight from your own classroom or campus? We would love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in to the Magna AI podcast. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube and learn more at magnaeducation.ai. Because when we support teachers with the right tools, we unlock what's possible for every learner.